And then finally Xavier says, I have faith in you, Raven. I believe you are not the kind of person humanity sees you to be. I've been trying to control you from the beginning. Everything that happens now is in your hands. He redeems himself. He sets her free to make her own choice, to stand up and be an individual. Where do superheroes get the moral authority? Come on. Where do they get the moral sanction to take the actions that they take? And that concludes the prepared remarks. Thank you guys very much. I'm sorry Len couldn't be here. This is so much fun. I love doing this. I could do this every day. Okay, so now I've got some questions, some leading questions that I want to use to pull us into the discussion. First question. Should exceptional individuals be controlled to protect society? Why not? Come on, more than one word answers.
30 seconds. Exceptional individuals cannot be controlled and will not.
Okay, interesting. Does anybody want to take a counter side? Does anybody want to play devil's advocate?
I don't have the moral authority to control them.
Ooh, that's interesting. Why not?
Because I don't own them. I don't have the...
But what if by controlling them you can save millions or billions of people? Doesn't that bear thinking about?
No, individual could be a threat.
I'm not a control freak.
Let me ask this question in a different way. If you could go back in time to 1932 and shoot Hitler, would that be a good idea?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Wait, didn't we just say that exceptional individuals shouldn't be... Isn't that controlling an exceptional individual? I mean, he was a maniac, obviously, but he managed to lead an entire country. He managed to inspire...
But he didn't have the moral authority to do it.
Okay, so it's a... But, again, shooting him, isn't that a method of controlling him?
How do you define the exceptional individual? Why is he exceptional?
That's an interesting question, and that leads to another question that I wanted to ask. One of the questions that came up was, or one of the ideas that came up was, if we could, if faced with these exceptional people, these superheroes, if we could take proactive steps to prevent a Thor taking over the world, a Superman taking over the world, or an Ozymandias killing millions to save billions, well, wouldn't that be worthwhile? But do we even need to go that far? What separates an Ozymandias from an Einstein or a Stephen Hawking? What's the line that separates a superhero from a really amazing human?
Cool costume.
Okay, so...
Truman.
What's that?
Harry Truman. Harry Truman decided to drop the atom bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki because of how many people died on D-Day. He killed millions to save, or he killed thousands to save tens of thousands. But he brought about an arms race that led to the Cold War, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Okay.
So what separates them is a bureaucrat making a decision and taking essentially the credit for it, and governmentalizing it in a way, basically bringing it into the bureaucracy, the decision to not necessarily control as much as direct the exceptional people like Einstein. And
Interesting. Who was part of the Manhattan Project, by the way? Back here.
You asked about the difference between an exceptional human versus this exceptional individual as a superhero, and I believe that's exactly what X-Men looked at. Is you had the entire range of mutants, from people that had absolutely minor mutations where they could barely do anything, to people like Magneto and Mystique that had powers that were truly staggering, and Jean Grey as well.
Sure. I got an even better example for you. What's super about Batman?
He's rich.
He's rich. There's rich. So take a Bill Gates, a less pasty, more muscular Bill Gates. Give him some jiu-jitsu classes, cool costume. Theoretically, you could have a Batman. Should he be controlled in that hypothetical situation? And this was, by the way, one of the best comics ever written. 1986, Frank Miller wrote and drew a comic called Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. It's in a dystopian future America. Batman is now in his 50s. He's kind of paunchy. He's been drinking, and he's out of the costume for 10, 15 years, but he just can't give up the itch, and he has to get back into it. And in the meantime, superheroes have been pretty much all driven underground. Superman became a shadow operative for the U.S. government. Catwoman is now running a brothel, escort service. Oliver Queen is a balding hippie with one arm cut off, apparently by Superman. And there was specific government action to take superheroes out of the equation. Can anybody think of any other stories that gave this example? The Incredibles, yeah, absolutely. And the Watchmen did the same thing, too. So,
the defining characteristic of this question, individuals, not exceptional.
yes, exactly.
So the real question is, should individuals be controlled?
Yep.
That is absolutely the question.
Not everybody's exceptional, but everybody's
Side note, talking about exceptional individuals, no, that's perfect. Side note, because this is a room of exceptional individuals, I will be really interested on Sunday to see if anybody at Comic-Con goes where Russ just went. Yeah, Lainey.
Well, I have a question. Well, I guess a question. Hitler didn't do what he did by himself.
No, that's true.
People put him there, and they did what he told them to do, or ordered them to do. They didn't have to do that. There's power in numbers. They could have said, hey, you're crazy. You're putting people in ovens, or we're going to overthrow you.
So would shooting...
They were like sheep, and they followed him around.
What gave him the power?
Yeah, they didn't start.
It was the British and the French and the Russians that gave Hitler the power because they were so punitive against the Germans for World War I that they made the entire society of Germans in a depression that they would listen to anybody because they needed to blame their woes on somebody.
Interesting argument.
Here, power.
I'm going to call that off topic, though, because I want to bring this back to the theme. Question or statement here.
Well, I think that clearly the answer to your question is it depends on the individuals. And you framed it in a collective way. Should all exceptional individuals be controlled to protect society? Well, I think we could all agree some should and some shouldn't.
Based on?
Whether or not they are acting in accordance with whatever it is that gives them their moral authority.
That comes back to the original question.
It definitely does.
What about what Stalin did when he started fearing individuals and he went after all the intellectuals and all the other people in his society? The fear of these individuals being able to do anything drove him to kill millions.
Mm-hmm. And I heard Pol Pot mentioned. Yeah, absolutely. Cambodia, they went after the intellectuals. Dennis?
Exceptional individuals are controlled to protect society.
How?
Tesla VS. Alternating current versus direct current. Direct current, you would have a small generator in your basement. You would control and generate your own power, controlling how much energy you get for your lights, your heat, etc. Alternating current, you build a giant power plant that would be centrally controlled by a government-sponsored monopoly, to which you must, by law, at least in Aurora, pay for access to that power. You may not, in many municipalities, due to danger or fumes or whatever, you may not use direct current. You must use alternating current. That will then be converted to direct current as soon as it hits your appliance because nothing runs on alternating current. But they chose alternating current over direct current because it must, by necessity, be centrally controlled.
So it was alternating current over direct current because they used a lot less wires, and you couldn't see the sky anymore in the city of New York when they were trying to make this decision at the World's Fair in Chicago.
Okay,
that was the decision for that.
Let's take this back to your original statement. So how does this reflect the control of exceptional individuals?
It's cross off exceptional, but then you also have to go to the protect society part, and protect society is an opinion. And it's an opinion at the moment in time of a large group of people that say this is good versus bad. And that's what it comes down to. Today we control lots of individuals for what we think is good. And to others, they think they're doing good. But it's the larger group that decides what's good or bad.
Fair enough. Yeah, one more, then I want to move on to the next one.
I want to address your original question. What is it that gives them this moral authority? It seems to me that it should be obvious to everyone in this room what gives the superheroes the moral authority to do what they do is the non-aggression principle, where if somebody is aggressing against someone else, you send a superhero after him. The superhero himself only defends the individuals who are being aggressed against.
Here, here.
Okay, but why the non-aggression principle? No, I'm not getting into that can of worms. Because then we're getting libertarian versus objectivist, and who's got time for that? Ain't nobody got time for that. Who's right? On the one hand, you've got Xavier saying oppression is no excuse for vengeance, for murder. I wonder, does the death of innocent people cut down on the streets as they flee free you? I think not. This one's kind of obvious. I want to leave this for the crowd on Sunday. I think we're all going to come down to the same place. I get rather to this one. Do superpowers or exceptional abilities confer the right to rule over others? Why not?
Because each person owns their own mind.
Okay, but so are you taking then a pure anarchist stance that there should be no government? How many people here want to stand on anarchist ground? Okay, let me rephrase. How many people don't want to stand on anarchist ground? Okay, so you're the ones I want to get into this because we're now assuming government. We're assuming some form of authority, some form of ruling over others. Do superpowers, do exceptional... Ozymandias, right here, that's the picture. Smartest guy in the world, uses 100% of his brain capacity. He can think around corners none of us could ever dream of. Does that ability give him the right, the authority to rule over others?
At what point does it become an infringement on individual rights and individual liberties?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, that sort of begs the question, doesn't it? I'm sorry, say again?
Government doesn't necessarily mean individual. So any
How do you mean?
Society, at some point, people are going to group together, and at some point, they're going to impose their will on others, and that is essentially
a government. Okay, so that just kind of begs that's getting again into the.
Another, you're going to get there. So it's just what government do you want? One that you chose, or one that was given or imposed on you?
Okay, so if it's a question of what government you're going to have, why not a government made up of people so exceptional that they clearly can do things that the rest of us can't do, foresee problems that the rest of us can't foresee?
Plato, bring us our philosopher kings.
That's exactly what we're talking about, isn't it? We're talking about Plato's philosopher kings. Why not a philosopher king?
Well, because I would say you would, by having an exceptional person ruling over others, they are preventing those others from living up to their own fullest potential. The more decisions I make for you, the less good you're going to be at making your own decisions.
Okay, but let me take it back one step. We are still assuming some form of government, right?
You are.
If we go to the anarchist point of view, then the question is rendered too easy. A. B. Remember also, and here I'm going to sidestep out of the Comic-Con presentation mode and step into the I'm talking to my people mode. Excuse me. I lost my train of thought. Let me find it again. I'm going to be talking to people on Sunday. I will be really surprised, unless some of you guys come along, if there is a single anarchist in the group. And there's going to be some people who would find the idea of no government at all shocking. And so the idea is to get across to them. How do I do that if I'm starting from a premise that they would never buy in the first place? So I start from a premise of some government. I'm going to leave aside what my own personal feelings are, but the question only makes sense with the assumption of some government. So that's the reason why I want to go from that point.
I would give to the question then are A, how do you determine whether or not they are in fact exceptional? And then secondly, how do you determine whether they are exceptionally good or exceptionally bad?
Interesting. Russ, did you have a further?
Well, I was going to say, are you hoping to drive them to the irony that you have the Watchmen up? It's basically going to who watches the Watchmen, or who watches the Watchers?
I hadn't actually thought about it explicitly in those terms, but that might have been in the back of my mind. I don't know. I'll have to think about it. My subconscious does weird things. But that is really kind of the question, because that's the title. The title of the Watchmen comes from that famous "Who watches the Watchmen?" Who guarantees that the people making these decisions are, in fact, making good decisions themselves? Which, again, comes back to that question of where does the authority come from? Yeah.
Yeah, and to throw it out there, and again, this has to come from the anarchist point of view, but I think it's worth stating just because of the crowd you're going to be dealing with on Sunday, which is if government is there to control bad people, who makes up government but people?
Very reasonable.
Good, bad. Not everybody has the same morals.
This is true, Dennis?
Government is not possible without the consent of the governed. Everybody in this room, don't lie to yourselves, went above the speed limit on the way here. The government said you had to stick to 55. You went 60. You know you did. It's just simply not possible. So superpowers or exceptional abilities, they can't confer the right to rule over others because you can't rule over others who won't consent to it. Heroin's still illegal. People shoot smack. They're doing it right now. Somewhere in a bathroom right in this town, there's someone shooting smack even though it's illegal. Because you just can't. It's not possible. You cannot be omnipresent.
Maybe take this a different direction. What gave the divine right of kings the ability to rule? Were they exceptional people? I mean,
the answer's in the question. Divine right of kings.
They came from the power of God. Did they do? There are good kings and bad kings. There'll be good superheroes and bad superheroes. So I would say no. No, they don't have the right to rule. But that would be the only. What's the difference between that and divine right of kings that we've discarded?
That's a great point. Anything else? Yeah.
Well, the issue seems to be we're looking at a good environment, but predominantly the world is controlled by the guns and the nasty and the powerful, who are willing to excel or be excessively brutal to convince your world how it's going to be. And this is the only country that has ever had an approach of civilization that wasn't ruled by the gun until now. And now the healthcare law added a 300,000-man Praetorian Guard to the president. Every governmental agency has its own SWAT team. We have so many armed people who hold us down to the ground if you do what they said. And you just saw the guy down in Texas or Arizona with the 200 or 300 armed men trying to take him off of his little car.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mike.
Yeah, I hate to critique the premise of the question, but it says exceptional people. And I think we would all agree that we're all born with equal rights. We're all born as humans. There are no superhumans. So in our world here, of course, no one has the right to rule over another because we are all born equal. And then I would say that exceptional people in our world they still don't have the right to rule over us, but they still do rule over us. And I think that's a very important question. Probably not part of this discussion is why they brainwash people into believing that they are exceptional and can lead over their fellow human beings.
Which is part of what makes this whole thing so fun. Because once again, and I'm going to say this by way of wrap-up, and I've got a couple more questions for you guys, stepping outside of the format. But superheroes, once again, they're individuals dialed up to 11. And here's now my personal opinion. They speak to, I think, the fact that there are no two superheroes are exactly alike. No two have exactly the same powers, the same personality, the same background, and thus it speaks to the tremendous potential that is found in every individual, and thus the absolute worth of liberty. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so enthusiastic about the genre and why I'm so excited to be doing this program. Okay, now I want to take this outside, and last bit of questions and that I want to ask you guys, because I got to deliver this now on Sunday. What do you think of the format? What do you think of the questions, the framing questions? Any suggestions, tips, questions that you would have me ask in this Q&A section at the end?
I want to know why the Incredibles weren't in there.
I had to narrow it down, limited time. We've only got an hour.
You brought up Iron Man and Iron Man in the Senate hearings, and so it made me think that there is a role of government in a lot of these stories, and maybe you could kind of hint at that. Should a government stop an exceptional individual? Does a government have the authority? Should a government stop exceptional individuals?
That's actually there by implication when talking about the X-Men, because the oppression faced by the X-Men is more often than not government oppression. In X3, well, actually in the first X-Men, you had the Mutant Registration Act. In X3, you had a vaccine that would take powers away from mutants being administered by the government, in some cases by force. And in X-Men Days of Future Past, you have the Sentinel program. Sentinels are these giant anti-mutant robots, once again, created as a part of a government program. So for those who know the comics, know the stories, that's there, I think, fairly implicitly.
I didn't catch it, so.
Are you an X-Men fan?
No, I am a total X-Men fan.
All right. Well, I will think about making that more explicit. What else? Yeah.
This final question, it might be helpful. Some sort of arbitrary definition of what a right is. I mean, I think most people in this room would believe that in order for you to have a right, if it's your right to have something, that means you cannot get it from someone else. Mm-hmm. You don't have a right to food, because that would imply someone must give you food, they have no choice. You do have a right to life, because it requires nothing of someone else once you're a certain age. A right to liberty, my ability to do what I wish as long as it interferes with no one else, requires nothing from someone else. The right to rule over others, it simply can't exist, because you must be able to subjugate someone's will in order to rule them. So, is in the room you're going to be in, that definition of rights is not established.
Fair enough. Good point.
You might want to address that.
Thank you. Any questions anybody think I should ask?
Well, how are you going to, once you get these people that are into the stories, how are you going to bridge that over into reality so that they finally understand?
I'm so glad you asked. Remember, I've been asking, where do superheroes get the moral sanction? Last slide. Where do individuals get the moral sanction to take the actions that they take?
That's going to go over like a fart in an elevator.
Interesting side note, there's a science fiction author who once described Klingons as the kind of people who would fart in an airlock. All right. Thank you, guys. So, oh, wait. Was there one more?
Yes. Will you come and report back and let us know how it went?
Love to.
I'm very interested to know
Okay.
how it goes.
And then one more.
I think you should ask whether the Punisher should have to abide by the magazine limitations we have here.
Thank you very much. Good night.